This is the Friday, April 27th, 2018 version of the Market Plus segment. Joining us now is Mark Golds. Mark, welcome back.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
All right, Mark, we got quite a few social media questions in this week, so we're going to just go on down the list.
Okay.
To start, we have Matthew in Nebraska. Says, how often do shipments of grain end up at a different destination than it was originally meant for, i.e. rejected loads, resold, canceled contracts, etc.?
You know, it's hard to put a number on that, but it hasn't been significant in years past. Now, we had this deal with the Chinese and the Sorghum, and some of the boats that were on their way there either had to turn around or find another destination. We see destinations being switched over prices. The commercials seem to handle it pretty well when they get these cancellations. They're used to it, and it's the same old games that have been played for a long time. But I really feel the vast majority of the contracts that are signed for and contracted actually get to the places they're supposed to get to.
Okay, and we have another question. I'm going to skip down here on the list. We have a question about sorghum this week. CJ in Nebraska said, what does sorghum look like in the future?
Well, it seems to have some play to it, even in the ethanol market. We've seen some ethanol people switching to sorghum. And it's kind of the unsung crop out there. At harvest, it's a beautiful crop to look at.
Goldenrod, yeah.
And, but it doesn't get much play in the press. It doesn't seem to have much interest outside the farming, rural communities. But I think more and more we're going to see that come into play, maybe in some other uses like ethanol. So certainly an alternative to some other crops if you're looking to diversify.
And I'm guessing part of that question too was what's been happening with China's tariffs.
Yeah.
I read in the news earlier today that potentially we have Steve Mnuchin in China to sort of work through some of those deals. Do you think that long-term China will pull back on those tariffs for the sorghum industry specifically? I'm
hoping so. I think it's just the Chinese learned a lot of this grain marketing game from the Russians and canceling, doing things. And I think they took a swing at sorghum because it was easy to take a swing at sorghum. But in the long run, is Mnuchin smart enough to include that? I hope so, and I hope there's some relief there. But in the meantime, because of the drop in prices that we saw because of that, this is why the ethanol plants are moving to the sorghum, because it's cheap and they can get it. And if we can move through some of that excess sorghum, it'll be good for the market. But long term, I don't know what the Chinese are going to do. I'm not that good of a chess player. But the fact of the matter is I think sorghum's a valuable crop, and it's got some potential there, and certainly a good alternative where you can grow it.
All right. Let's take a question here from Bill in Armenia, North Dakota. He wants to know, have there been any shifts in acres yet since we've seen some weather?
I don't think yet. You know, we're still pretty early. We had the worst weather that I can remember in April, certainly in the Midwest. Certainly slowed things down. We look at the spring wheat plantings, dismal compared to what it could be. But we're starting to change the weather now, and the biggest weeks traditionally are ahead of us in terms of planting. So I believe the American farmer can get the crop in the ground. They always have, in my opinion. They always will. Give them a small window and they can get 50% done in a week. We've seen that before. So I don't think we're going to see switches because of that. I still believe that if the American farmer can get a lot of corn in the ground, he's going to favor corn, and those numbers may go up, and it may be at the expense of beans. If we see continued weather problems, then we'll see the shift. But I think all things being equal, we aren't going to see that big of a shift that the government's looking at right now.
Okay, and when you look at corn acres that could potentially switch, how many more acres are you looking to switch to corn?
That's a hard number to guess, but
it is.
Is it 500,000, is it 1 million, is it 1.5 million? It's really hard to know. Again, it's going to be so dependent on weather and the emotions of the farmers. If we get December corn over 416 and we get a nice little pop to 430, that's going to certainly sway some guys to, well, let's try to get some more corn in. So it's a function of the weather and it's a function of the price, and we'll see what happens over the next 3 weeks. We've got 3 to 4 weeks to get the crop in the ground, so I don't think it's going to be a major issue when we're done in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
It's definitely something to watch here as we move forward.
Yeah.
Monica in Rockwell City, Iowa, this is an interesting question. Why has the cost of eggs gone up so much? Feed prices have remained the same.
You know, that's a good question. I think we've seen some scares in the egg market, and we've had to destroy some eggs here and there. And I really don't have a great answer for that question.
Probably the egg recalls had a big part to play.
I think that had partly to do with it. You know, the Merck used to have an egg contract years ago, and it was there were a lot of games played with that back in the 70s. And frankly, I don't keep a real close track on the eggs, except for the layers and what kind of feed consumption they're going to have. But egg prices are something that have historically been manipulated. Not that these are. I think there's been some fundamental reasons behind it. But I really can't give a great answer on that.
Okay, no problem. Let's move on here. Rodney in Edgar, Wisconsin would like to know, what direction do you see the cattle markets headed for the summer months in both live and feeder cattle?
Well, I think both of them have got the challenges ahead with all this extra beef coming in. Is the weather going to be good enough where demand for grilling and outside activities will pick up enough to absorb this wall of cattle that are coming in? I don't have the answer for that. I think from a technical standpoint, watch that June cattle contract. If we close it under $100, now that once the April goes off the board, which is Monday, I think that's going to be the signal that we're going to see some lower prices here than what farmers would like to see. So certainly, if we do close under $100, I would look at buying some puts to protect that downside. I hope I'm wrong. Demand continues to be great, but I think it's going to be as much of a technical signal for us to get involved and to really get aggressive on managing the risk, because demand's been good and we've got this higher price out here. And can the cattle move up? We've seen that happen before, so let's hope that it happens again.
So we're really going to be watching Monday to see where the April board falls off and the June comes on.
Well, it's going to be more whether or not that June contract any time in the next couple of weeks closes under $100.
Okay, the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Another question here from CJ in Nebraska. Is NAFTA instability affecting price of corn?
I think that's part of it. You know, we haven't heard anything about the wall from the president in a while.
That's true.
And it seems like the president wants to negotiate new deals, whether it's with the Chinese, whether it's with NAFTA. I think we're going to get some headway there. I'm hoping we do. Certainly, trade is good for the American farmer. So I'm hoping that something positive comes out of that. What was his direct question? I'm not sure I answered it.
Is NAFTA instability affecting the price of corn?
Yeah, it's had an effect, because when we talk about, you know, maybe the Mexicans pulling back in the short run, but if there was something substantial that didn't happen with NAFTA, then it's going to have a run on prices.
Okay. Taking another question here from CJ in Nebraska. What about the future of ethanol?
Well, when you look at the way the car manufacturers are getting into these electric cars more and more every day, and driverless cars and more efficient cars, are we going to have a long-term market 10, 20, 30 years from now for ethanol? I still think there will be a market there. Are we going to be able to use 4, 5, 6 billion bushels of corn in ethanol? Will the demand be that good? Unfortunately, we've seen great technology happens much faster than you would think. You know, the driverless cars took a setback with the accident, I think it was in Phoenix, but it's coming. And the electric car is here, and there's going to be more of it. So long term, I'm not sure that demand's going to be able to stay, but certainly in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't see an issue with it.
Okay. Just a couple more questions for you, Mark. Chad in Dunbar, Nebraska. I thought this was a pretty good question. Will the KC wheat market make a high in May this year?
It depends on the weather.
Okay.
I don't know that we're going to know the real ramifications of all this weather until this crop really gets in the bin. And the Kansas tour is going to give us a parameter to look at and say, okay, there's a lot more damage. In my opinion, I think it's going to show a lot more damage than people were thinking, which could cause the spike here in the month of May. And is that going to be it? it may be if we don't have real hot and dry weather in June to finish off the crop. If we have hot and dry weather in June, as some are predicting, then we could see another jump to another level in prices. So how do you play that? May 15th, maybe you sell a portion of your wheat. May 30th, sell another portion. And maybe on June 15th, sell some more. If you're worried about not having crops, then don't get too aggressive on the cash sales, obviously. But it's going to be a weather issue as much as anything else, but I'm hoping we can see higher prices and the market finally recognizes that we have a problem out there, particularly in this hard wheat. And if the spring wheat can't get planted, you know, we still have the lack of demand around the world, but we still have a domestic market for wheat, and that will be enough if things get bad to push these wheat market prices higher, in my opinion.
Absolutely. All right, Mark, we saved the best question for last. Steve in Findlay, Ohio said, it seems like Mark is always bearish. I wonder if he is ever bullish the markets.
Oh, we just got done talking about I'm friendly to the soybean market, I'm friendly to the corn market, I'm friendly to the wheat market. I think people get the perception because I'm a risk manager. And my job as a risk manager is to make sure the American farmer is still farming next year. And to do that, we have to protect against the bad things. The American farmer will do great in the 2 or 3 bullish years out of 10 that we get every decade. But in those 7 or 8 years, the prices have a tendency to go down. That's where they're going to struggle. So my primary job as a risk manager is to say, let's protect the downside and hope for the best on the upside. So my bias is always, particularly at decent prices, to have puts on to protect the downside. Now, when we were at 340 corn, I wasn't bearish or looking at puts. When we were at 950 beans, I wasn't bearish or looking at puts. There's a time and a place for those puts. But now that we've rallied these corn well over $4, November beans are at 1050, these are prices well worth protecting. I hope the market goes higher. But at Top Third, we're not in the business of speculating and trying to outguess this market. I've always said, if any of us gurus knew where the market was going, we wouldn't be telling you.
Right.
We'd be long retired. So what we want to do as a risk manager is to protect the downside and let the upside take care of itself.
Absolutely. Handled like a true politician, Mark.
Thanks.
Mark Gold, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Join us again next week when we explore how the pecan industry is working to preserve market share in the shadow of trade tariffs. And Sean Hackett will sit across from me at the market-to-market table. Until then, thanks for watching, listening, or reading. I'm Delaney Howell. Have a great week.